So for those who haven't met, I'm Donovan. So welcome Friday afternoon, 3 weeks out from Christmas. It's amazing to know, and I think a testimony to you, Rick, that the interest in you and your topic, that people just responded. In fact, we were starting to get a bit worried, we're going to fit everybody in. But they said, don't worry, we'll be able to stack 40 people in here, so I think we've got 30, so we should be comfortable. Sorry, there's a back row. I'm sure as the day goes on, you can kind of squeeze in a bit. So it is a real pleasure to have Rick here. I should maybe just give a little bit of background. A few people have asked, well, how do you know Rick? And Vanessa, who is my social media advisor and in the right age group to do that, would be pleased to know we met on social media. So many of you know the Big Kahuna Leadership Survey that I published last year, and a number of people involved in that said, oh look, Dell have done a similar study. They said there was a bit, not quite right, I think there was 5 times the number of people and a bit of a global reach when one was Australia. But anyhow, you should talk to them about their study. So I thought, all right, well, I've got onto LinkedIn and found the Dell Chief Technology Officer, and he said, sure, I'd love to talk. And so we talked about his report, and he said, love your work, and so we said, oh, well, what else could we do? And he said, well, you should meet this guy who's writing a book about the future of CIOs. In fact, some of you have asked to contribute some views towards, because he's going to probably say it next year. Phil Wineside. And so Phil said, you should meet Rick, because he's coming out and he's going to give a presentation. This is about 2 weeks ago, I think, Rick. Yeah, so I said, all right, well, let's grab the opportunity while it's going by. I guess Chris was saying earlier, it's the kind of era we live in, isn't it? So there's an opportunity. Rick's out giving a keynote address at RMIT this week, so let's grab him while he's here. He's been doing some roadshows in the US on this very topic, social media strategy, and a good deal of interest. A Microsoft platinum partner there had him travelling around, giving this talk that he's going to give us today. So we thought, why not grab it while you're here? So we really appreciate you making the time available today, Rick. And as you can see from people who've come 3 weeks out from Christmas and Friday afternoon, it's a topic that's on people's minds. I should just give you a little bit of background to Rick. It'd take me probably all of the afternoon to give you the full CV for Rick and his accomplishments, but he is the Rex Fuqua Distinguished Chair for Internet Strategy in the Terry College at the University of Georgia. And he's been living in the US for about 28 years. But you'll notice that he's got an Australian accent, so Jim will be familiar that you can still hold on to your Australian accent, and was originally born in South Australia and brought up in West Australia. And still knows a bit about Aussie rules. So
questionable teams.
Carlton, isn't it? But we'll probably cover it as we go through the day. So as well as Rick's interest in this social media strategy, a new area of, well, the last 5 years, I think Rick, your interest in energy informatics has really expanded, and we published a book in that area. And maybe in the Q&A section we could even get you to talk a bit about what's happening in that field. Rick is also the director for something called the Advanced Practices Council of the Society for Information Management in the US. So this is a collection of several thousand CIOs, or
People in the industry.
People in the industry. And Rick chairs the group that does some research programs. So the companies contribute funds to relevant research, and then Rick finds the researchers to do the work for them, and has really been doing some very interesting stuff in that area. So opportunities, I think, beyond today to build links with Rick and with the Advanced Practices Council. I think the opportunity in your talk today, Rick, is great to establish those kinds of links and opportunities. So could you join me in welcoming Rick and saying thank you for making the time? And
Well, you've got to be opportunistic in life, and when it's a chance to talk to a group of people about the things that you're interested in, you take it. I should tell you about a little bit of other opportunities. So I'm sitting down having breakfast one morning, and my wife and I are going to be married on November 22nd of this year for 40 years. We've been married in Melbourne, right, 40 years ago. And I get this invitation to speak at a conference in Melbourne that's on December the 3rd, right? It's only a few days later, and I say, I should take you to Melbourne to celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary. Because when you get invited to speak at a conference, someone pays, right? And you can afford to be generous. And then she did point out that I was about 10 days late. But I calculated that it was a 0.06% error. And I'm sure those of you who have service level agreements will be very happy with an error rate like that over 40 years, right? So we spent 6 years here. It was a very formative and transformational period of my life. I came here from Western Australia. I wanted to escape the western part. As soon as I graduated from UWA, moved here, started my career with the Postmaster General's Department, which is now Telstra, Information Systems. Did my MBA here, and 2 days after I did that, I got married. So a lot of things happened in my 6 years. Now, one of my jobs is the Research Director for the Advanced Practices Council. This is a group of about 30 to 35 CIOs. Some of the names of the companies you would recognise, like Heinz, BP, Conoco, Chubb Insurance, IMF, Moody's, right, some of those you might know. And these people meet every 4 months, and my job is to work with them and help them to identify the topics that they think are important for their future as a CIO. And then I go out and find a researcher who can address that topic and also speak to an executive audience. And one of the topics that's interested us for a couple of years is social media strategy. And so we started off, I brought in the CEO of a company in Atlanta, one of my former students, who set up a social media strategy. They had clients like Coca-Cola and so forth. And she gave a talk, and it was interesting, but there wasn't a framework that you could use and go away and apply for your business, right? Then we brought in another academic. She gave a good talk, but again, there wasn't something that put it all together. Finally, we got Munir Nandiwala at Temple University. He came in and he gave us some ideas as to how we might approach this from a strategic perspective. When he was writing up his report, I looked at it and I thought, oh, I can see a way of fitting something else in. Right? I saw another piece of the jigsaw. And so we worked together to put together a framework that I think you will find is useful thinking about social media strategy. So what's a definition? Now, academics always have to start with a definition. Right? This is a pretty simple one. It's not on the exam. Right? Enabling humans to communicate electronically. I mean, we've been communicating for a long time. We think about social media. It's now we can communicate electronically. I'll give Brian the slide so you can put these up. If you look at what's been happening in this space, tremendous growth in things like text, video, photos, and networks. Right? All of the figures change very frequently, but the volume is very high and the growth rate is very high. And this is something that organisations are trying to deal with. It's very chaotic. There's almost a new social media company every week, right? And about every month, someone's getting $1 billion for instant this or brand that or snap something or other, right? It's very messy. Organisations don't know what to do with it, right? How to address it. It's diverse in the offerings out there, and then there are potential pitfalls, and I'll show you a couple of cases where companies have really misjudged how to operate in this space. But the big question that should address managers is, where's the value? How do you get something out of social media? Right? So how do you take this chaos and turn it into capital? That's an important theme that I'll talk about this afternoon. And then how do you engage in this whole space? One of the ways that you can get an idea of the chaos is the fragmentation. Jobs are all over the place, which is actually not too surprising to see later. There's a reason for that. Salaries are all over the place as well. Right? Corporations don't quite know where to place their social media talent. Now, I was really lucky. Before I did this roadshow for Microsoft Platinum, a partner, McKinsey & Co., the week before, put out a report. Sometimes you get lucky. And they asked the question, why do so few companies capture the full value of social technologies? Which is exactly what I wanted to talk about. And when McKinsey & Co. come out and pose the same question, you've got some credibility, so you've got to throw that up on the screen very early on to establish that you know what you're talking about. There's a couple of key points in this, right? Few firms have figured out how to use social technologies. Large scale, replicable, and measurable impact. And then, here's the point that I want you to keep in mind. About 2/3 of social's estimated economic value stems from improved collaboration within enterprises. Most people look at social media and they think Facebook, Twitter and something, that's outside the organisation, right? That's something that customers will be doing. There's value within the organisation. McKinsey and Co suggest that that's where the value really is. Another problem they alerted to is that mindsets are hard to shift. And that too many companies just view this as another tool rather than an opportunity to transform the relationship within the organisation for greater sharing of knowledge or your relationship with key stakeholders such as customers. And they fail to identify the important problems that social media can solve. So they really alerted people to the issues that we're going to address this afternoon. Now here's when you can get into chaos. And this is Dave Carroll. And I'll give you a little bit of this music, but the important things to note are that Dave Carroll had a problem that United broke his guitar. So he couldn't get any response from him. They wouldn't fix his guitar, they wouldn't respond to him in a positive way. So he wrote a song that went viral. 13 million people have watched this, right? It was picked up by CNN and New York Times, and he wrote a book about it. This is the most popular song when he sings, right? What does this do to your brand if you're United? And it's funny actually, it's very watchable, but this creates chaos for the organisation. They don't respond to it, right? They create their own chaos. And look, here's the indifference of the people. It's really smartly done. Why the Mexicans are in there, I've got no idea, but you know, it's amusing. So that's the homework, is to go and watch that again, all right? Chaos. Right? You don't want that, right? And it even gets worse. Hitler learns about that United broke his guitar. What you can do, I don't know if you've ever seen these Hitler spoofs, when Hitler gets some bad news and goes berserk. You can make your own, right? If you go to this particular site, you can put the text in there. And this is an opportunity for you to use social media as well. So, for example, you might be trying to convince people to use decent passwords, right? So my idea is that Hitler just learns that his Facebook page has been hacked by the Russians and his status has been changed to losing World War II, right? And this poor general has to explain to Hitler that Führer is a poor choice of password if your name is Adolf Hitler, right? Now, you can use that to get across the message, or you can publish a one-page memo and send out a to everybody. Which one do you think they're going to remember? And so here's a way you can start to use social media to get across important messages about things that matter to your organisation. We're actually going to use this for a conference that I'm organising in Savannah next year, and Hitler's paper is going to be rejected, right? And it's going to go berserk. I think more people notice that than anything else we've said now. There's another great example out there. Abercrombie and Fitch only sell clothes for relatively slim people. And this upsets them, and so there's a video of a guy who goes around to Goodwill stores and St Vincent's and stuff like that, collects all the Abercrombie and Fitch branded stuff, and then gives it away to the homeless in the street. A lot of damage to the brand when these sorts of things happen. Now here's a positive story. And this was actually a program run by the CEO of Mega Player. And Sunglass Hut decided that they would create a Miss Full-Time Fabulous. This woman was going to get $100,000 a year, a suite in the W Hotel in New York, and enough money to go to all of the major fashion shows in the world and blog about them. So they ran a competition to pick the woman who would be the blogger. Actually, one man entered the competition as well. Right? Wanted to be Miss Full-Time Fabulous. They ran that. People wrote interesting blogs. They picked the best 12. People voted on these. And then they had a blog off in New York to pick Miss Full-Time Fabulous. Off she went. And blogged a lot about Sunglass Hut. This got as much buzz around Christmas as Macy's. Macy's is the big department store chain. Budget, $250,000. This is understanding how to use social media to turn it into capital. In this case, the capital being the value of the brand of Sunglass Hut. Unfortunately, this was a very successful project. Why, unfortunately? Because the two people that were behind it got promoted. And those who stepped in their shoes didn't really understand the message they were trying to convey and the commitment that was needed to follow through this for a year to keep up that momentum about this quality and so forth. Now, how do we start to think about what social media is about? What is a model that I can give you to use? And let me start off with thinking about the natural environment and energy. And the natural world is an energy conversion system. So the sun shines every day, things grow. Sorry, I'm putting bell. Sun shines every second day, sometimes during the day, and plants grow, animals eat them, right, and they get consumed up the chain and so forth. And so if a lion sees you, you're just a source of energy, right? And that's how the energy system works. The interesting thing is you always get out less energy than you put in, right? Fortunately, the sun shines every day and we get more energy. But that's how the natural environment works. We have created a built and social environment. And the parallel to energy is capital. Now, here's what capital is. It's a durable and transforming factor of production that you've generated by a prior investment. Right? You've made something, you've invested there, and it's going to pay off for the long run. So it could be this building, it's a capital investment, and you rent it. Right? It's the parallel to the natural environment's energy. Right? But there's one big difference. And let me just talk about different types of capital to start with. Here are the various types, and let me give you business examples of those. So economic capital is about resources that we create. If you're someone like UPS and you have 90,000 trucks and depots around the world, you've created a world-class logistics system. You've invested in economic capital. Right? Don't think of economic capital as just dollar notes and things like that. The only people who can directly make economic capital is the Federal Reserve, the central bank, right? They can print money. Everybody else has to find a way of converting something into cash. Social capital is what politicians create. So from an American perspective, Bill Clinton probably accumulated the most social capital of a politician. He tried to destroy it a few times. Right? But he's extremely good at building relationships and building social connections. If you look at symbolic capital, which is about brand and reputation, something like that, BMW has an excellent brand, and it's reputed that their brand is worth $10,000 extra on every car because of the image that they've built. Some companies are very good at building human capital. If you're Goldman Sachs or you're McKinsey & Co., then your future depends upon recruiting exactly the right sort of people. And they put a lot of effort into doing that, right? Their business is about getting good human capital and using that for their clients. In terms of organisational capital, then it's the people and the skills and things like that you build to enable you to run the company. Walmart has built a world-class logistics system through all of the procedures it's developed and the computer systems. And then finally you have natural capital. And so the Australian mining companies are world-class in exploiting that. So there are different types of capital. Now, what we've created is a capital creation system. You are in the business of converting capital from one form to another, and ultimately to create economic capital of some sort of cash flow. The interesting thing about this model is that the capital out has to be greater than the capital in if you want to stay in business. Right? Nobody gives you free capital every day to get started again. There's no free sunshine in the business world. So you are in the business of capital creation, right? And capital conversion. So here's what it looks like. You have some capital flows coming in. You've got processes within your organisation that convert capital from one form to another. And then you have some capital outflows. Now it might be that you have capital losses. Someone steals your intellectual property. You lose some key people. Right? Those are all capital losses. Now not every business is about producing economic capital. If you work in a university, it's about taking human capital and then converting it to better quality human capital. Religions are often about converting symbolic capital, social capital, creating capital. And all of this fits together. All right. So let's have a look at an example of how this operates in practice. So here's the Microsoft example. And have a look at what start. So this is Gates and they have human capital. And most startups have some particular talent. In this case, it's the ability to write software. They had 6 employees. They had some social capital, connections. And then they had some economic capital. Not much, right? They were license. And some organisational capital. They had the space. This is typically what happens. Actually, the example I used to use was Steve Jobs. When Microsoft had a look at my slides, they said, you need to change that. But that's typically what happens. And then, this is what Microsoft is today. It's been a massive capital creation and conversion system. And now it has, in terms of human capital, about 90,000 employees. However, if you look at the partners, there may be 1 million people around the world who are part of the human capital of Microsoft, all of those partners. In terms of social, they have connections throughout the venture capital market, so that they know what new products and software services are being developed. So some of those are things they will purchase, some of those are ideas that they will incorporate into software. Economic capital, their software, their devices, data centers around the world, royalty streams from competitors and so forth. And then organisation, their main capital is Microsoft Research. So all of you have some sort of portfolio of capital, and you specialise in doing different elements of it. So Microsoft is probably specialising in human capital these days, recruiting a lot of young graduates. So what's social media strategy? It's about creating capital from interactions facilitated by social media. You are in the business of creating capital. So you start off with, what's your organisational strategy? What are you trying to achieve? That would lead you to certain capital creation goals. So if you're Goldman Sachs, your goal, besides making a lot of money, which they do, but in between, they have to hire the right sort of capital, human capital, and train them so they can create a stream of cash flows. Right? Without the right human capital, you don't have Goldman Sachs. So their strategy has to fit in there. And then that leads you to what's your social media strategy. If you know what sort of capital you want to create, then social media is a mechanism for creating that capital. So that's what it's about. Right? This is the way to think about it strategically. My friend Munir identified 4 mechanisms for creating capital. I'm not certain that these are the only 4. You may find others, but the important thing is it gives you an idea of the approach that you can take. But that list of capital is very much well defined in the literature, what sorts of capital you might go. So let's have a look at some of these and see what some companies are doing. So lesson and brand is about thinking about how marketing and corporate communications react to customer offers. Right? And understanding that your brand is now partially owned from your customers. It's socially constructed by your customers. You don't control what's said about your brand anymore. Once you can be on TV and you can broadcast the message. What about United's brand? Right? You saw what happened there. They lost control. Great damage to the organisation. And then there's all sorts of electronic word of mouth. What you want to do is get yourself into that stream, listen to what's happening, and then look for opportunities to enhance your brand. Is it easy? Well, here's an example that makes it look easy. I think it's much harder. So this is Smart Car. And they're watching the Twitter feeds, right? And someone says, saw a bird had cracked on a smart car. Total. So the marketing guy at Smart Car picks this up pretty quickly and says, couldn't have been one bird. We've done the mathematics. It was more like 4.5 million pigeons, 360,000 turkeys, 45,000 emus. The reaction to people who read that tweet. Does that create value for your brand? Right. Is Smart Car a smart company? Right. Is it a cool company? Right. That's what we mean by listen and brand. It's a little bit like judo or jiu-jitsu. You are trying to turn something that might be to your disadvantage to your advantage. Right? You have to be sharp-witted. So what are you trying to do with this? Well, you need capital in, and some capital comes out. What you need are humans who have listening skills, right? who can be watching these various social media streams, blogs and tweets and Facebook and so forth, pick up what might be adverse events and then turn them into something positive. So you also need some analysis software that can be tracking those. Now that's not easy, and I'll come back to that later. What do you expect out of it? Well, stakeholder knowledge. You need to know what customers think of your company, or maybe investors and so forth. In terms of social, you're trying to be in the channel. Right? You become an accepted member of that channel. Not always easy, as we'll see in another example. And you're trying to build your brand. Right? So there are certain capital outcomes, but you always have to invest capital to get capital. It's not free. What are the risks? You don't want it to end up to be a discount bonanza. Right? Customers come to your site to get 10% off or something. You're trying to build more than we give away money. That weakens the brand, weakens your profits as well. You'll get a lot more complaints than compliments. That comes with the game. How do you mitigate these risks? Have a good partnership between marketing, communications and legal so that you create a response that is legally okay and acceptable for the organisation. And monitor and respond quickly. So one of the members of APC used to be PepsiCo, CIO. They had 25 people monitoring social media. And you're just watching that all the time. Coke probably has a similar story. It's really interesting when you have PepsiCo as a member, and you're in Atlanta, which is the home of Coke. You cannot serve Coke. Right? You need to get out of the room. And then you try and measure the effectiveness of your responses so that you know what works in this channel. You also need to be aware of what's the impact if we don't listen. So if you're someone like United and someone tweet or a blog comment or a song can have a tremendous impact upon your brand, then you need to have an organisational defence that's very high up in the organisation. Or if you think you can turn it into positive outcomes that match the strategy, then have it. Maybe if you're a mining company, you don't really care what people say on Twitter about you because you've got long-term contracts with China and stuff like that. So it can be sitting down at the bottom there as operational tactics. You need to understand how important is social media and the potential threat to us and how we handle it. Clearly United didn't know what to do, but smart card knew how to handle it. Mine and decide. Looking at unstructured data and trying to detect trends. And so social network analysis is used to try and understand how people are connected and who are the opinion leaders. The US Army trains all of its officers before they were going to Afghanistan on how to map social networks. Why? Because when you send a drone to pay a private visit, you don't want to knock out someone on the peripheral, you want to knock out the person in the middle. And there's very much the strategy of the Army to take out what we would call opinion leaders, but these are the people who are leaders themselves. And if you're tracking their phone messages and all those other sorts of things, you can generate something like this. Now, in the business world, there's a measure out there called clout. And you all have a clout measure, unless you're not at all connected to social media. And this is based upon your interaction in Facebook, Twitter, blogging, and so forth. Right? So that some organisations, when they get an adverse tweet, someone complains about the company. In fact, that's the best way to complain. Don't phone. Because only one person listens to your phone call, and they belong to the company. If you tweet, lots of people might listen to it. Lots of people might see it. And if you have a high clout score, and the company's smart, it's going to look at your tweet and your clout score, and then decide immediately how to respond. Right? If you are an important person in a network, then the clout bias response will be much more significant than if your clout score is around about 12. And you only have to be on the internet to get 12, right? So don't go home and check your clout score and get 12 is pretty good. Right? Means you type something a couple of years ago. Ideally, you want to integrate your transactional and social data to have a really 360 degree view of your customers. You can't always do it. A lot of companies do sentiment analysis. Are you familiar with this idea? Twitter feeds. What it does is it takes the feed, breaks it up into words, and counts the positive words and negative words. It's very crude, doesn't take account of irony or sarcasm or things like that. It's a rough measure. The research we've done shows you're actually better off just picking random tweets, because the problem you're trying to solve, if there are 500 tweets about your company today, which 20 do you look at? Which 20 do you pass on to the head of the market? But you can't look at 500. So we have research where we're trying to use machine learning to teach the computer what's an important tweet, and then use it on a whole stream of tweets. Look for problems and opportunities, do this social network analysis to find out when you. So that's mine and decide. Here's an example of this applied in the social capital space. There's a famous campaign in the US when the Chicago Daily Tribune came out and said, Dewey defeats Truman. And they had done polls in the city. And the polls in the city said, Dewey's going to win. Truman initiated the idea of the whistle-stop tour and travelled all around rural areas of the US, encouraging people to vote for him. Won the election, played with a new game, played with the social media at that stage, standing on the back of the train and talking to people. In 2008, Obama worked out how to use social media and contacted millions of new voters. Had a huge turnout. Helped him win that election as better organized. If you have a look at 2012 compared to 2008, lots changed. And they changed their strategy. They learnt and continued to learn how to use social media to turn out voters. And the Republican Party didn't know what was going on. They learnt towards the end when they saw that the Democrats were hiring data analysts. And they wondered why they were doing that. And the Obama campaign was really organised with people. I'll give you a local example. We had a couple of friends in Athens who were very devoted Democrats. And so they got information on what were the marginal electoral areas in Virginia, which was supposed to be a swing state. And they went there and knocked on every door. There were 95% turnout of the people in that voting area that were targeted. The other interesting thing is they said there were a lot of Europeans there who took holidays to go and knock on doors in America to get Obama elected. This is understanding how to use social media, engage people in the election process. So the outcome was that Obama won the election. This is very much data-driven, and we now know from some recent research at MIT that data-driven organisations are more profitable. Data-driven elections lead to positive outcomes. One of the other smart things that they did was they knew enough about you that you can learn a lot about people from social media. That when someone called me, for example, asked for a donation, they would be maybe, ideally, an Australian, of my age, right, of my socio-economic group, asking for money. And I'm more likely to give some money to someone who's like me than someone who's not. And they had that matching process. Now the other side of it, who was the big winner as well, was Nate Silver. He wrote the book Signal and Noise. He was a columnist for the New York Times, and he broke the election down into very precise small areas and predicted exactly what would happen months in advance. He's now gone to ESPN as a commentator, much wealthier man than he was before the election. But it shows the importance of analysing social data and learning from it and discovering what information is there. If you want to follow elections, I don't know if Betfair is in Australia, but this is another social media technique that's very accurate for estimating outcomes. Hewlett-Packard used something similar for forecasting the sales of printers. And what essentially you do is you give people money to bet on outcomes. Now you can ask people who they're going to vote for, and they may be dishonest, not reflect their true opinions. But if you ask people to put their money into the outcome they think is going to happen, they don't have to tell you, they're more likely to bet on who they think will win. So Betfair's showing Hillary Clinton is going to win at this stage, based upon Bill's social media skills. Remember earlier I said that politics is about building social capital? See how Obama went about the process of building a tremendous amount of social capital in the election. What are the risks? Textual analysis is very imprecise. Remember the old expression, garbage in, garbage out? Well, you change it for text. Ambiguity in, ambiguity out. Language is very ambiguous. We have a whole industry trying to decipher ambiguous language. They're called lawyers. Right? If law was precise, why would we need people, the whole system to interpret? So English is not too bad. Some other languages are more difficult in terms of ambiguity. There's no quality control on Facebook posts or blogs or anything like that. They don't have to be grammatically correct. And the problem is that most of the analyses are word focused. You take the text and you break it up into bad words and you treat each word as independent. It's very unsophisticated. So if you're going to go into this area, make certain that you manage your expectations from those who you report to. Right? You will get some value out of it, but it's not like crunching numbers. Right? It's not like turning out bills for a telephone company. That's an easy job. And so we have to move beyond that naive analysis. And of course, a lot of people are investing in this, right, trying to develop these systems. If you notice, say, I think a couple of days ago, Apple paid $200 million for a company that analyses Twitter feeds. So they have probably developed some very good algorithms that go beyond words and look at sentences, and then maybe even paragraphs to understand. It's a difficult problem. Humans are good at it, but it's too expensive to employ a couple hundred people looking at everything that's said about your company. There's a bunch of opportunities in there. I'm not going to go through all of these. 4 major types of communication formats. You can have the slides and you can have a look at those to give you some idea of how you might work in that space. In terms of mining to side capital, you need human skills, data mining skills. These, unfortunately, are in high demand in most parts of the world these days. Once companies realise that data-driven organisations are successful, they obviously get into that business of data networks. And then you need to create these social databases, right? Harvest these various streams of data that are coming, bringing them together in a database that you can then mine. On the output side, better knowledge about customers. Right? So you're trying to learn what your customers want, maybe what new products and services they want, and so forth. And then what are the market trends? What are the patterns that are happening in the market space? So if you look at disease detection these days, you can learn a lot from Google searches. Right? Suddenly there are a lot of Google searches on measles, and the Centre for Disease Controls knows that there's a measles outbreak somewhere. This is social media. How can you mine it to learn about trends in one particular industry? The third mechanism is converse and share. Finding out ideas and knowledge that work for you, forming communities that are going to tell you how to improve your product. Starbucks no longer has an R&D department. Their customers are their R&D department. Why? Your customers use your product every day and reinvent it in ways that you would never anticipate. So why not get them to tell you what they do? And getting in that community and participating in it, and then sharing and reusing knowledge. So this is a way to learn from them. Here's an example of Lockheed Martin. It's got 125,000 technicians, 65,000 scientists and engineers. And in the US, it's at a stage where many of these are around about retirement age. This is a tremendous amount of knowledge to be lost. Cannot afford it to look out the door. So they've created a process of trying to capture this details of their maturing workforce, and then take best practices and codify them into organisational practices. So how do you learn what you have in the organisation and capture? Let me tell you about another company that's similar to this, and that's 3M. 3M have about 47 key technologies. It's probably not a company like 3M anymore. If 3M can match 2 of those technologies together, they can create maybe a new product. If they can bring 3 together, it's probably something that nobody else can do. One of my friends is the chief knowledge manager for 3M, and their problem is also similar to this. How do you capture all the knowledge in the organisation? So he was asking for some help in doing that to meet one of his strategic goals, and they've taken the model that I'm presenting here today and using that as part of their talent development, skill sharing capability within the organisation. They recognise that human capital is a skill that they have to develop. You might realise it, but if you take a product like a smartphone, like this phone, 3M probably have 20 things that they can sell to Nokia or Apple to go into this phone. And so the big problem for them is when they send a representative to Apple, who do you send and how many do you send so that you can describe accurately all of the capabilities of what you can put in that phone, including something to detect whether it's falling in water, film on here, prevents marking, smudging and all that sort of stuff. It's a very complicated problem trying to manage knowledge in these high-tech companies, and they're using social media to learn about it. Now, the old approach was to think about knowledge management as you could capture it all and you'd store it, and you'd ask everybody what do you know about it and put it in a database. That doesn't work. What you have to do is try and capture connections between people, start getting people to share knowledge. So what are the risks? You don't want to be a heavy-handed interloper who comes in and says, tell me everything you know. Right? Mature managers and senior researchers will probably react in a different manner. Who owns the intellectual property? So what you need to do is have a community manager, and you have a senior executive who is a champion of this process, and you think it through. Think through what the incentives are. Now it turns out that many senior researchers get to a point in their life where monetary incentives aren't too important. What they're really interested in is passing on their knowledge. We get a lot of people come to the university who've finished working and now want to teach, right? This seems to be a stage thing. You did it earlier on, did you, Tim?
Yeah, well, very, very young.
Yeah. the age bracket. But people want to share their knowledge, right? They feel they've created something they want to pass on. Provide a mechanism for that. And sometimes it's just titles and things like that that will work as incentives. So here's an example of where you can go wrong with converse and share. JP Morgan, this is the company that recently paid a $13 billion fine for the US government because of some of their bad behaviour. More fines are on the way, this is just the beginning. And they thought, well, we'll have to improve our public image. We'll get the vice chairman to go online and tweet and respond to questions, right? Brilliant idea, yeah? So off they go, and the tweets come rolling in. Exactly what they wanted, right? They closed that thing down as fast as they could. Meanwhile, everybody captured the tweets and they've gone all over the place. You have to be very careful when you converse and share. Because if you've got a lousy reputation in the marketplace, people will turn on you very quickly. GM did something similar. They asked people to create YouTube videos of one of their big SUVs. Guess what they got? A whole bunch of videos about destroying the environment, gas guzzling and all of that. I think it's much smarter to be like Smart Car and listen and then see the opportunity to come in. But don't ask for people to slap you all over the face and everything else that you do. So converse and share, what do you need? Community management. You have to understand the community that you're going to get into and then not be a manager, but be someone who's in there, right? Be accepted in the social space. And so you're trying to build a social network of which you are an accepted member. JP Morgan is not accepted by tweeters and bloggers and so forth. Right? Remember Occupy Wall Street? That's the company they're after, right? That's part of the 1%. In terms of output, human capital. And so you change the culture from need to know to need to share. We need to share what we know so the company is better off and the next generation is skilled. And then best practices don't start typically with committees. Best practices usually start with smart people who work out how to do something differently. And what you want to do is capture those and turn them into organisational processes. Right? Do you find that in your company? You've got some smart folks who do things a little bit differently and take advantage of it. Right? They'll find a good way to make the organisation. Final one is co-create and innovate. How do you get new ideas and predictions and solutions? You can do things like crowdsourcing, putting it out to a whole bunch of people. You have to decide how open you want to be. You can run some of these things internally. Your idea is to improve your products and services, come up with new products and services, and then organise it in capital. So Chubb Insurance runs these sorts of things on a regular basis. They actually run them on the weekend, and they bring people in, and they brainstorm, and they come up with some ideas. That's how they generate them. They don't do them too frequently because there are some risks. Here's an example of one of these projects. This is Let's Do It Portugal. And Portugal's got a problem in that when people want to get rid of an old mattress or some furniture or something, they don't go to the landfill. They actually go to the nearest forest and throw it in there. You know? So you can imagine the dandelions with old mattresses and everything else that people want to get rid of. 2 or 3 people got together, some friends, and said, this is pretty bad. We should clean up Portugal. And so they used social media to call for volunteers who identified and mapped 13,000 sites. Because everybody's got a GPS these days, right? So you go out there and you find someone's put garbage, or trash, or rubbish, whatever country you're in, okay? And then through social media, they got 100,000 volunteers to clean up 50,000 tonnes one weekend. This is the power of social media to get people behind them and organise them and solve the problem. What are the risks? Who owns the intellectual property? How do you assess the value of what is created? And how do you get started and maintain the interest in this? I don't think you want to do it too frequently, because the problem is you have to demonstrate that there is a result, an outcome of people brainstorming. One of my colleagues was supporting entrepreneurship, idea generation in the organisation, and he said there's 2 reasons why it fails. Why don't people give good ideas to managers? Because they think the manager's not going to follow through on their idea. Why don't managers listen to their employees' ideas? Because they think the employee is not going to do anything, they'll just leave it to the manager and take the idea, and the manager will be responsible for implementing it, right? We've got this sort of standoff in many businesses. People expect the manager to implement the idea, the manager expects you to implement the idea, and nothing happens. So if you're going to go into something like this, there has to be a process that's followed. And so you have some rules of how to engage people, you establish some incentives, and then you have a process for evaluating which of the ideas do that. So in the Chubb case, at the end of the weekend, they've selected 2 or 3 ideas that are going to go forward. Right? Maybe further evaluation before something happens. One of the outcomes was piracy insurance. Remember when there were pirates in the Indian Ocean? That Chubb got into that business. Right? Here's a risk. They hadn't identified it. The employee did. They created a policy so that you can safely travel in the Indian Ocean, provided you pay your money. Input, human capital to manage the community, and then some organisational capability to establish the community, software, and those sorts of things. Output, new products and services. That's what we're looking for when we go into this process. So here are the various mechanisms and goals that you can see what capital can be achieved in various processes. So when I presented this talk one time at the founder of the company there, he had someone from HR next to me and said, this is our social media expert. And she said, well, I'm in HR, I don't know why social media. He said, tell me why, what you do. And she said, I'm a stalker. We go out and look for people who want to live in places like Mobile, Alabama, because we have an office there, and if we advertise generally, nobody applies. So I go out and I look at Facebook, I look at blogs and those sorts of things, and I find someone who went to school in Mobile, Alabama, who has relatives there. People say all sorts of stuff. And then I check out their qualifications, and if they're a good fit for us, and then I'll try and entice them to join us. And that is a very important element of this company's strategy. Why? Because the founder said, it is easier for me to get a customer than it is to get an employee that I can retain for the long term who has the skills that I want. And so for them, social media is a strategy for getting the right sort of human capital. Very appropriate that HR with the social media. So what you have to think about in your case is, what are your capital goals? And therefore, how are you going to use social media to get those? So this gives you an idea of how to do that. So here are the critical questions you need to ask yourself. What capital should be created by my business? Well, it's probably the capital that's critical to your success. If you're a politician, how do you create social capital? If you are a high skills, knowledge-based company, how do you recruit human capital and develop it? Right? So that you are there for the long term in terms of knowledge management. So what capital has to be defended? How do you defend your brand? How do you enhance your brand? I saw a couple of examples. How do these four mechanisms fit together in your case? What's the mix that you're going to use? Right? And how do you convert this mix of capital investment into social media opportunities to create a larger pool of capital? Because that's what you're trying to do. Right? Now, this is not just a model for social media. Every one of your strategies is really a capital creation strategy. That's what your business is about. It's capital conversion, which I suggest every company is. Then you look at your marketing strategy and other sorts of things in terms of capital creation. So now are you ready for it? So what I've been trying to do this afternoon is help you to think about strategy. That recognise that it's not necessarily messy. It might appear messy, but you can get outside of that and say there are certain goals that I need to achieve. And so now you start to get the mindset that says, all right, we could actually develop a social media strategy. We don't have to get confused by thinking about all those 50 different coloured things in there. Right? We first of all start with understanding what our business is about, capital is the one. And then you need some skill sets. Do you have the capability to do the business intelligence and tech side? Have you identified these streams that are out there, the public streams that might exist, the private streams that you might create in your company, such as blogs, right? And maybe partner social data streams. So many organisations now are starting to get into this model of streaming data. Walmart, for example, stream data to their suppliers about how much they sell in each store every 10 minutes or so, so that the companies can better plan how they're going to replenish Walmart. Why does Walmart do that? Because if it can make its partners more efficient, it can squeeze prices out of them, lower prices. Its business is to be a low-cost provider. What are the tool sets? Do you have the necessary data management and exploitation tools to get into this? But you can't really start this until you sit down and work out what your strategy is. Right? Otherwise, all you do will add to the chaos. Right? You'll be like JP Morgan, and you'll jump in there and you'll make a mess of it, right? Or you'll fail to react. So there's a systematic approach that you can go through. You can develop a strategy, and you can go through building a skill set to implement that strategy. So you have a choice. Do you want to stay in chaos, which is what a flood is like? Or do you want to invest in capital by creating a dam? You can then use the irrigation and hydro and all those other sorts of things for many years. You have the same choice in social media. It doesn't have to be chaotic. You can actually turn it into capital. Many companies have discovered how to do this. So I hope this afternoon I've given you an idea of how to go forward and think about social media, but more generally, how to think about strategy as a process of creating capital. Any questions?
I've got a question around that cloud measurement. Well, what is a good cloud measurement? You mentioned 12 is the bog standard internet user. What would be a good?
Well, I think my score is 46, so anything above that is good. I don't know, but you can probably find out what the distributions are, and I can have a look at that. And you would then decide, I'm going to operate for anybody who's above the standard deviation. What percentage do you want to operate with? The top 5%, right? 2 standard deviations above. So it's data driven.
So you can actually influence your cloud score to...
Yeah, you can. You can change it by going in there and opening up Twitter feeds and stuff like that, telling it what social media spaces you're using. Right? You're using Flickr or and stuff like that. And that's how you can get it started. It's really interesting in a class, even with executives, to say, find out your clout score, right? And then who's got the highest clout score in the class? And the high ones I've seen in class tend to be about the 50s or something like that. Maybe one was heavy blocks that was higher. And you can find it out. The trick is to marry it all together. I think AT&T are doing this. They might be doing this. This is one of my students who's doing social media. Yeah, you hadn't heard of clout before?
No.
It's a wonderful idea, isn't it?
You can download the little app on your iPhone and gives you your score and range over. It's a free app. And it'll give you a association. So Oprah Winfrey sits in at 90.
Oh, okay. What's your clout score?
53.
53, see? Anyone above 53 who have any high bids?
Give me a minute.
53 is pretty good, right?
And it does, like exactly like you said, that perfect storm of dynamics. It offers you to interconnect all of the social media networks, and then it accelerates the parallel rate.
Yeah. So you can start to raise. Have you done all of that to get up to 53?
No, this is very
So,
vital.
I'm for a Winfrey in bacon.
Certain trends, experimented with social media a little bit, and I found humour drives a lot of traffic more so than interesting facts.
Yeah.
So I've got an internet business on the side. It's interesting. We post a funny picture, post it to Facebook and to Twitter, it goes viral, and you can see how many reactions you get. Whereas if you put an interesting fact, then the reach goes down on Facebook and not so much on Twitter. So do you see that as a trend globally in terms of material humour is probably one of the biggest drivers, or what's your view on it?
No, I don't have any take on that. I mean, humour's always been pretty important in advertising and connecting with customers. But that's something someone could test, experimentally test how that operates. If it's important to your organisation, you could do that. One of my daughters used to work for Macy's, and they would run these little experiments all the time to find out how people would react to changes on the website. And I can remember she made me do the stats on something. Worked out there was a change, and they did the change, and every time they did a promotion, they get 100,000 extra in revenue with moving stuff around the website. Every company should be experimenting these days. If you've got customers communicating with you electronically, you can run these little experiments with maybe a small percentage of your customers and learn all sorts of stuff. It's an opportunity that we didn't have before. So maybe you can find out whether it works better for some mechanisms that are built up.
What examples have you got around employees and how that's been harnessed around? And obviously they have their own clout and they're active in communities. Because a lot of organisations get very worried about controlling the employee and managing that. So I'm interested in your thoughts.
I think the things I've seen are more the deliberate ones, like Lockheed and 3M, to engage the people in sharing knowledge, and not the sort of individuals doing their own thing at work through Facebook and work and so on. You've probably all had the experience of the secretary of Facebook's at work and criticises the staff. Get that? We've had that. Yeah, I don't know much about that side.
I was interested in what you're saying about listening and the strategies associated with listening, because the smart car example was a very good one of somebody who was listening.
Yeah.
But all listening isn't equal. So some people do it differently than others. So strategically, how do you look at that difference, that capacity to listen well?
Yeah. You know, I think you need those people who like to make puns and wordplays and have that tangential twist to them. And they see something and it's like the judo thing, they can see how to spin it around, make it go the other way. And so it's a listening and responding skill as well. Not easily found, I would suggest.
And not responding to.
And yeah, it doesn't mean you don't want to respond, because the response could backfire on you. And that one worked really well. There wasn't much you could say in return, except maybe you could calculate how many birds of certain sizes.
was a good example of a particular female hygiene product in London where a particular person wrote on social media a complete diatribe about why do you promote women having a great time during a very difficult time of their health during the month, and it's all done very excitedly, and he wrote this really bad complaint, and the company very cleverly came back with a very smart and amusing response. It was hilarious, and it was very respectful to everyone, and they got like 20 million hits on it, and their brand went through the roof, and the sales went up by 10% over the next week. And it was very much like the bird one, was the response. So this guy wrote a funny ad, worth running ads like everyone's happy during that time of the month. It's not good.
No, horse riding.
Horse riding.
Horse riding.
Horse
Going to the
riding.
beach.
Going to the beach, that's exactly right. And the managing director of the company produced a video that came out on Twitter and YouTube and said, "You're right, we've been lying all along." And it went on from there. It was very clever.
Yeah. But you probably only need to do that a couple of times a year.
Exactly.
I suspect it has something to do with humour as opposed to defensiveness.
Yes.
If anyone tries to actually defend it by saying that's not true, our smart car is actually a very good car, or it does not, so that doesn't exist. Probably do some linguistic analysis.
I think social media and social matters go very well together. So if you become defensive or aggressive or abusive, even if you're right, you will lose.
And respect.
Exactly.
Diversity.
So I think social media is well.
Some of the Daily Show, John Stewart, you probably need someone like that on your staff.
And might it be expensive, but think about the impact on the brand, and they do this twice a year. You know, you probably get some unemployed arts graduate who wants to write their famous novel and do this for you or something like that.
There was a particular example recently about a particular person who wrote a complaint about a restaurant. And it was an unfair complaint, but unfortunately, the owner of that restaurant got on, I think it was Foursquare, I think it was just one of the feedback reviews, and wrote a very defensive, aggressive response. And what he wrote was fair. He said, "Come on, Mike, we work hard, we served the food, we ran, but it just wasn't smart. You should have just written, gee, I'm sorry about that, come back and have a free meal, we'll have really game over." But it's, sorry, my wife's a master's in PR and communications and used to work for a few banks. She reminds me every time I want to get back and hit someone in the head. I said, no, and particularly social media, this is a time-bomb waiting to happen. Leave copper first, humour second, and then listen to your customer.
So it's old lessons applied.
Exactly, the world doesn't change, humans are still humans.
But what happens is that the world has been magnified, right? And that's what you really have to be careful with in this series.
We had that experience. We rolled out a new CRM system to all sort of 60,000 supporters. And as with every CRM system you rolled out, there were one or two glitches in management of their accounts. And we started to get some fairly heavy traffic on Facebook complaining about, having had 3 donations taken in 1 month and that sort of stuff. And we sorted all these things out, but the way we dealt with it on social media was I decided, as marketing director, I'd write a note basically saying, look, put a new system in, we're having all sorts of problems with it. We were really frank with them, and we had the best response to anything we've ever posted on social media. People were delighted that we were honest with them, and I think that's the problem. A lot of people just aren't honest.
And so you were building a brand in the process. The symbolic capital is really important. So you see the examples where symbolic capital and human capital really come into play.
Rick, I think, and Vicky may have asked this question along similar lines, but you talked earlier about sort of community practice leaders in organisations and not having a management-driven approach, but letting the smart people start to take up the cause because they kind of know what's going on.
Yeah.
Have you done any studies around this collaborative organisation, seeing that scale out, where you harness a whole culture in an organisation that's more towards that client-focused, digitally enabled and adaptive approach, rather than what is still a controlled path that's selectively letting things out there?
I did in one of those organisations, universities like that. University of Georgia actually has a quite strong sustainability program despite the administration. And in fact, our students donate $3 every semester, they agreed with that, to fund the Chief Sustainability Officer for the university. And the previous president didn't want to have anything to do with it. and the faculty have taken it away. And so we get, there was an announcement came out a couple of days ago. In terms of courses and that, we get a gold star. In terms of administration, a silver star or something. So but universities are sort of designed to work like that. My guess is you see those sort of things in Google as well, because that's a bit of a replica of a university that came out of it. 3M, for their senior scientists, they give them a lot of latitude. I think if you're a level 6 scientist in 3M, and there are very few of them, they have all sorts of free. Now they really screwed it up a few years ago. They hired a guy from GE who came in and just did cost control. They pushed their profits up for a couple of years, they killed innovation, and they put it back someone else now understands the culture. I mean, it can't work for everybody in the organisation. You have to have some people who concentrate and get things done and get it out. You need to give some people some slack to think about these issues. The interesting thing is some people are highly motivated, like Chubb. They can get people to come in on the weekends because they care about the company. And then they see that you take notice of their ideas. And the biggest compliment you can pay to someone is listen to them and try to put their idea into practice. And then they'll be your friend forever, right? Contributor forever.
Rick, where or who in the organisation is best to drive this kind of social media strategy? You had an earlier slide that said the salaries are all over the place, the positioning of it is all over the place.
And
Even
that's,
in some of our discussion we talk about some of it's marketing driven, sometimes HR.
well, it really goes back to this.
In the Obama case, he had a very clear direction from a CTO, didn't he, that drove that campaign.
I mean, what's the capital you want to create? If human capital is central, then it's a HR function. Right? If brand is critical, symbolic, then marketing. Right? You might have them in both. Right? If you are trying to build a social network and connections with people, then it might be public relations or something like that. And then organisational might be in the information systems group that you're trying to learn what are certain very good practices and codify them when you into the organisation. So that's why it's fragmented, because it doesn't belong in a single spot. Right?
That's a nice way to think about it.
Yeah. So work out what your capital goals are, and then you might locate it in several spots. So, some companies have to be good at multiple things. If you're Myers, my guess is you have to be pretty good at organisational capital, because retailing is a low profit business, but you also have to be pretty good at symbolic, because you have to build the brand. Right? So you have to do two of those things. So you might actually have two groups working together, because there are two centres of capital creation.
Just a quick question, Rick. You talked quite a bit about corporates, companies that actually sell products. Have you done any work on services and consulting companies? And if you have, were there very many differences between the corporates or the...
Your business is a human capital business, right? You want to be a stalker, like the woman I mentioned, right? Because you're very dependent upon finding the right people, aren't you? And then placing them in the right place. So how do you recruit people? Do you use LinkedIn for all your recruiting? Yeah. It's changed dramatically in a few years, hasn't it? Nobody recruits much through ads in the paper anymore. But if you go to LinkedIn, you know a lot about that candidate before you even talk to them. Yeah? And so you need to be very skillful using LinkedIn and the parallel sorts of things around that space.
Just to follow on from that, I think social media was always seen as another tool in brand awareness. Is it overtaking things like TV and print? Are we seeing that you should just be focusing purely on social media, or do you think it's got to do with the type of business? Or?
I try to be data-driven, try to have some data to answer questions. I don't have it in this case, but if you look at the market trends, movies away from TV and print, well, newspapers are starting to go, and what happens when the ads come on in your home? Looking at the iPad, stuff like that, or you fast forward through it. So people are trying to use social media to do that. I don't know that we worked out how to do it yet. And that's what Facebook is hoping to do. That's what Twitter is hoping to do through advertising and those sorts of things. But that's always been a problem. You know, what's the famous saying? 50% of our advertising money is wasted. You say which 50%. Money is wasted in a lot of channels. You've got to experiment to find out what works for your customers. And the beauty these days is experiments are much cheaper.
Social media more engaging though. I don't know if anybody's seen the recent Volvo ad, Jean-Claude Van Damme. So it shows you him between two trucks, and there's a whole build up to it through social media, YouTube, and it's all about how it's made and if it's real or isn't it real. Clicks are going through the roof, whereas with an ad on TV you just see it and you judge is it real or isn't it real. There's a whole campaign about Jean-Claude Van Damme, how he did it. So you're literally clicking on different videos to see it. It's just all evolving. 20 minutes for one video, very short period of time.
Can they do that in TV? They've always had teasers in TV, teaser campaigns, and sort of have a build up through. So, yeah, right.
There's a series of accidents with Volvo trucks regarding the decision shown back to the line on social media. The sort of marketing team decided they had to find a way to show people that Volvo trucks were precision. Hence they got John Ford Van Damme to stand on these two trucks and spread his legs as they drove backwards into the city. So it's actually a direct answer to some feedback they got from some accidents they had and some concerns they had.
And this points out the need to have a group of people who are ready to respond. Right? It's like disaster response. To get ready for that. Does that give you some ideas then? Think about social media and how you can now start to fashion a strategy.
Before you close out on this topic, can you just give us a snapshot from your research council work on some of the other things that you're seeing that this audience might be interested in, particularly around the energy side of thinking?
Just give you one more shot. But actually, I'll give you a couple of diagrams just to explain what's going on. What I see is a shift in dominant logic, but I need to explain to you what that is to start with. Dominant logic is the way an organisation organises itself to solve its central problem. And for most companies these days, customer service is the central problem for most organisations. And if you look at it over time, you see that we've gone through several dominant logics. The first one was how to survive. So if you're hunters and gatherers, the information systems that you need are gesturing and speech. So my thesis is that dominant logic determines the information systems. So it turns out that hunting and gathering is much more successful if you do it together. So the first thing we learned was gestures like that. Actually, don't teach your kids to gesture. There may be some gestures you tell them not to use, but you don't need to gesture. But you do teach them language, right? And that enables you to cooperate. The species that dominate the world are the ones that can communicate, like ants and humans without even the this. And then we went to agriculture. And so then you start to get the development of arithmetic and money and measurement systems, because that's what you need to be successful as a farmer. You need to know how much you produce, how much you're going to sell it for, and those sorts of things. And you need methods of economic exchange. Writing was invented to record transactions. A lot of these things are driven by what's the important dominating thought of the period. And then when you get into the production era that comes around about the 1760s, and if you look at an assembly line, they don't change much over time. The sorts of information systems that were developed, cost accounting, came in about the 1690s before this, because once you start to manufacture, you need to keep track of costs. Right? That's the information systems. And then you get accounting, and later on you get ERP, right? Enterprise Resource Planning. That's all about managing resources. In the mid-80s, 1980s, that's when customer service emerged. And Peter Drucker said the job of an organisation is to create a customer. So what are the information systems that you've seen come out in recent years? CRM, right? It doesn't emerge until organisations say customers want that. Now, customer service doesn't come about until we have an oversupply of production capacity. When you're like Henry Ford and you can sell every car you make, you don't have to market. When the world has a capacity maybe to produce 25 million cars and the market's 20 million, you have to be very good at marketing. And that's true for many areas. So, some of that's for the academic stuff. But CRM, business analytics, these are all recent developments. They're all about analysing customer data. Because we have a customer service dominant logic. Now, it might vary. So the way that Coles organises itself to be customer service oriented is probably different from Qantas, right? But they are still very much dominated by that logic. There's a wonderful story I use actually about Qantas. Like, you remember the story about the people who travel on the plane because they get their pajamas or something like that? Yeah. Remember, that was customer service, dominant logic, right? We'll stop the plane for half an hour. Off and put them up in a room and get them their pajamas, right? When you're customer service dominant logic, you think about that. Yeah. I hope they're not it's a great one for me to use in the US because I can talk about Australia. That's right. You've got to be very careful with humour as you go around the world. And the best humour is the jokes about yourself, right? You can only offend yourself. So what I see emerging is a shift to a sustainability dominant logic. Let me give you an example. This is Ray Anderson, who was the founder of a carpet manufacturing company in North Georgia, where about half of the US carpets are made. He made industrial carpet, like this stuff here. And what he observed was that after a few years, his carpet was ripped up and ended up in a landfill. And he said, I like being in this business. He wrote a book called Mid-Course Correction. He said, I am going to stop selling carpet. Very drastic move, right? You're committed to environmentalism when you stop selling carpet. However, he wanted to stay in the carpet business. He changed his business model. His dominant logic is now one of sustainability. He leases carpet. What does that mean? At the end of the period, when this carpet is no longer functional, it's taken up and he has to dispose of it. So he has to redesign his carpet so that he can chop it up and use it to make new carpet. There are examples out there of companies that are rethinking their business logic to put sustainability first. So another thing he went through his factory and looked at all of the pipes, and the plumbers are very neat people. Right? And so if you look at the plumbing in most factories, it's nice and like that, right? What happens when you drive into a T-junction? Compared to going around a nice curve. There's a lot of friction to push fluids through right angles. Right? And so he went and changed all of the pipes in his factory to be gentle curves and fat. Right? And reduced energy consumption by 90% for pushing fluids through the factory. So when your mindset changes, and actually you don't exclude customer service dominant logic, this is another logic that comes on top of it, right? But for him it became the forefront of thinking about how he ran his business, right? The energy efficient, being able to recycle, and now you see this cropping up in ads, right? Many companies are thinking about sustainability as a very important part of the logic of the business. So if you are a CIO, then one of the things that's going to happen to you is your organisation will ask you to develop information systems that support the sustainability dominant logic. It won't be something that sits on the side for reporting occasionally to keep the green score high. It will be built into the fabric of decision making in your organisation. So I'm not totally certain what all those systems will be. I think you'll see massive sensor networks, so you know what's happening. So one of the other companies that I've done some work with is UPS, and they put a black box in every one of their trucks, and they record 4,000 to 5,000 GPS elements of every one of their trucks every day. And they analyse that for idle time, reversing, mechanical failure and so forth. And that enables them to be much smarter. And I was talking to one of the engineers a couple of weeks ago about where they were with their new system, and he says they believe that they can reduce idling time by up to 25%. That's almost a 3-day activity. What do they do? Collect a massive amount of data about the network, what's happening in the network, and then analyse it. I think you'll see more simulation type systems as well. So have a look around, you'll see the signals that companies are shifting. You've probably seen that in your companies. You'll see the appointment of a chief sustainability officer. And marketing will move beyond just saying we're green to actually showing how you're green and all that. And then the sorts of supporting systems will develop. Because the role of information systems is to support the dominant logic. Makes sense, doesn't it? Company wants to operate in a certain way, information supports it. So I think that's the important change that you need to start looking for in your organisation. And my job is to try and help CIOs get ahead of the curve. Maybe 6 months ahead of somebody else. And that then can give their company and them competitive advantage. Okay?
That's great, Rick. Yes, thank you. Before we close out, I'm going to ask Chris Stevens. So Chris is the Managing Partner of Digital Frontier Partners, and perfectly placed really to talk on this topic yourself, Chris, but been a great collaborator in helping get a group of people here together today. So, Chris, would you like to propose a vote of thanks?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And look, just on behalf of everyone, firstly, thanks at short notice for making the time to come in here, Rick. It's been a great session, and I know, even though I tend to believe I live more in the digital space than some people, it's always new things to learn and great insights to hear. And the things that really stood out to me was really a refreshing view that wasn't so much about Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and all those things that absolutely have their place, but really bringing it into the business world and putting a value context through the capital lens over it. And I think for business leaders, that's one of the most important messages to take, because I think our role is to actually evangelise what you inherently do with this stuff. It's happening whether we like it or not. And it's really about saying, what can we do as leaders to put it into a frame of discussion that others can connect to it and make good of it and ultimately produce capital and business value. And I feel that came through really, really strongly for us as a group. I love the anecdotes and particularly some of the examples of where it's worked well and particularly where it's worked not so well. So it shows that it's still an imperfect world, and it requires insight, thoughtfulness, decision making to make all this come together. I like some of the other points you talked about. Clout measure, I've got to admit, is new, and I'm going to be Googling that straight after this. One of the other ones was really around sort of the power of people. You know, we talk about sort of getting messages and getting reaction and connectedness, but there's a further element to it, which is really about the thought power of people en masse in a crowdsourced sense. Being able to actually come to arrive at a level of accuracy when you get people lining up on a question that's targeted, and the ability to actually use the forces of human beings in a way that we've never really been able to do easily enough before. So that's been great. I think the other key one was around the usage of data around this, without the context of strategy and the ability to harvest information or data and make informed decisions about what you want to do with it. It's all really just another layer of stuff, and I think that's a really important message for us to take away. And the final bit that I took out of it was really around, don't try and apply the typical organisational approaches to getting stuff done to make this really flourish and work. You've really got to tap into the people who bring something to the equation and create the context for them to bring it to life. And that means in some cases letting go. And I think that's a bit of a new management paradigm for a lot of us as well. So look, just on behalf of the group, I want to say thank you very much for a really insightful and enjoyable presentation. Thank you.